Well, Mark, that is one sweet 54 Merc.
Thank you.
Let's bring it up a decade. That was a custom of the 50s. Here's a custom of the 60s.
Yep.
The 65 Riv. Now, why the 65 Riv?
Well, the same reason the 54 Merc. It came out of the box custom, and I think that they'd gotten better at it by the 60s, and this one took less than the 54 to please me, at least.
Now, did a car like this play a role in your youth at all? I mean, was this one that you, oh, gee, I always wanted a Riv? Or?
When I graduated from high school in '64, I would immediately have wanted one of these. In fact, there was a kid who had a '63 Riviera.
Ooh, cool. Definitely the coolest kid on the block, right?
Lord, Skylark wires, great sound system, and he was the guy. And I was imprinted by that, and I had to get to be 200 years old before I could have it.
But now you do. And you went with the Skylark wires on yours too?
Right. Now, in the old days, his were 6-inch, which were stock Skylark wires. These are 7s. And we thought another inch of depth would fill the wheel well a little better. And
they look great. The color is unique, though. It's silver, but it's kind of green. So there's a little bit, almost a shade of blue. It's a blue-green. It's a silver. What is that color?
It has some real character. I don't want to tell you, or you'd probably use it on
one of
yours,
it could be.
Yeah.
It's a special blend, but it's kind of a greenish, right?
It's a green. It's called Glacier Green Metallic. It's a BMW color that I saw on a new BMW 8 or 9 years ago when we were about to paint this, and it was perfect. And I went directly to the BMW guy, got a brochure, came back to my painter and pointed out the color and said, get that.
Lo and behold, that's what it is. Huh? Now, in the front end, you didn't do too much here because it has such a wild front end to begin with. You cleaned up the grill a little bit?
Exactly. We blacked out part of the grill, so the illusion is that it's just got horizontal bars in it. We don't run a front license plate, so we had to remove some parts on that bottom panel, and that's it. I mean, the clamshell headlight doors are stock. So.
Those are so weird, but they're really cool at the same time. Now, you've dropped it down. With the Merc, you used kind of, more, old school lowering techniques. Right. Is this on air suspension?
This one's on air springs. Eric at Advanced Design Fabrications did it for us, did a really good job. It has its vices and it has its virtues. I think in balance it's a pretty good way to go, and it's fun to drop all the air out of it when you park the car. And you can get in some predicaments where putting some air into it and raising it up a little bit doesn't hurt either. Yeah,
well, when you're this low and you're trying to clear a driveway or something like that, it's nice to be able to bring it up. I always like the lines of these cars because they're so sharp. Another, and particularly this roof line. At this point where these three lines come together, I just think it's so clean and so crisp.
I agree. It's interesting that the peaks on the Mercury approximate the peaks on this. But as that peak gets around here, it isn't as pointed, of course, because it has a different radius. So somehow it has to make a transition. But GM did that for us. We didn't have to have anybody but the General on that one.
And it's a green interior, a dark green interior. Was that the color it came?
The car, yeah, that's in fact is the correct material. We got correct restoration material for the trimmer, and he just did a tuck and roll.
The wood that's in there is, if I recall, that's not a photograph of wood. That's real wood veneer,
that's
right?
Real wood, yeah.
Did you have to refinish that, or?
Well, we just keep putting the oil on it, all the things that you would treat a wood thing with, and it's good enough not to have to replace, we think.
I like the skull. The shrunken head. They've got to have a shrunken head in a car like this, right?
Well, as you and me against my wife.
Well, the other thing that's interesting about these, because they were so custom in their look, but boy, the gauging in it is really GM of the period. I mean, it's it's mostly idiot lights.
Yep. We've got a couple of gauges inside the console there, so I can see oil pressure and water temperature when it's for the money.
So you actually know what's going on. So what else did you really do to it to clean it up? I guess you debadged it, right?
Debadged it. That's about all you have to do on one of these, at least, like I said, to meet my standard. We got what we wanted with very little effort. We stripped all the paint off it. Terry Hagman had filled a couple of holes in it for us and commented on how straight it was, suggested that if we stripped the paint off it, we could get a really exceptional paint job and nice car out of it. So we went to the trouble to do that.
Oh, she looks great.
Like I said, the General.
And I mean, boys, debadging it back here really cleans this trunk area up. I mean, you didn't do any other metal work or anything back here?
No. The preceding 2 years of this car, the 64 and 63, had these tail lamps up in the body.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And they did us a favor by putting them in the bumper this year, so once the Riviera was taken off the back of it, it became customized.
It's smooth,
yeah.
And it's just so slick looking. Man, that again, custom from the factory almost.
Yeah.
So this would have had a 401?
This is a 401 dual quad motor.
Oh, wow.
It might have been more fun for it to be a Grand Sport with a 425, but it gets us around pretty well like this.
And with those dual quads, it still sucks plenty of gas,
I think
right?
so.
Let's have a look at it. Basic Buick.
Just basic, all stock stuff.
Uh-huh. And this is a car that, I mean, this is one you just play with, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in the rotation. We just drive it when we want to go somewhere.
You know, I'd like to go somewhere.
You want to drive?
I want to drive.
All right, let's go.
Let's do this one. Let's see how that dual quad 401 works. This was a pretty revolutionary car when it came out, actually.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything quite like it out there.
I think the designers in that era were influenced that people were taking their work and modifying it, maybe in some cases making it better. So they were challenged on particular models where they didn't have some of the 50s excess.
Yeah, over the top stuff.
Yeah. I guess probably the 54 Merc and the 65 Riv probably bracketed that era of excess.
With some of the extremes being like, oh, the 59 Caddy.
Could be a 59 Caddy or a 59 Buick. In fact, I saw you doing a 59 Buick on your program yesterday.
Those things are so big.
They are
so crazy big.
Matching eyebrows, front and back.
I know, I love that.
It's cool stuff.
You kind of forget some of that stuff. It's when you get around these cars and really start to study them, and maybe you didn't even notice it to begin with, but boy, you know, you start looking at these and you realize some of the design greatness that went on back then.
It's fun to look at the GM Auto Show Autorama cars, the futuristic cars, and see where they plucked design elements from them and put them on production cars later. I mean, that's why they did it. But it's
well, I think the LeSabre is one of the great examples of that.
You bet.
And that was, you know, Harley Earl used that as a daily driver for like 50,000 miles or so.
Yeah.
And you look at that car and you see where the Corvette interior came from, where it came down between the seats, and you see all these different things that showed up in other cars. I love this car. Man, are these seats cushy? Is this how they?
Yeah.
Wow.
Pretty much stock deal, all fully adjustable and all, but.
And Buick's always been this sort of. It's always been kind of an interesting brand. You know, it's this luxury brand that always had a lot of punch.
Yeah.
You know, it was like sophisticated muscle.
Yep.
Well, you do feel like you're cruising in this car, though. You know. It's like, and the lowriders love these cars.
Yeah, they do.
And I'm amazed that it's actual wood that they used instead of, you know, some stencil of a piece of wood on steel.
Right, a photograph of wood.
Well, where'd you find it?
I told a friend of mine I needed a 65 Riviera, and he'd been to the Donut Derelicts in Huntington Beach. Said, hey, the guy down there's got a Riviera for sale. So he gave me the number, I slid over there and bought it.
Well, because usually these dash pads are cracked too.
Yep, and this thing had a lot of virtue, and it looked like a car that we could make ready for this kind of street duty without a lot of great expense, and so we were able to pull that off. We kind of like to start with a good car and suffer what the difference of cost is on the buy-in, knowing that you benefit later.
Yeah. And this is one that you just play with.
Just play. They're all really play, but this one is definitely in the rotation. It's a townie, goes to dinner, goes to a concert. This is the one that we've gone to the West Coast Customs deal in every year for 10 years, I think. And that's its one long trip each year, and it isn't that long, but 500 miles, I think, or 600 miles.
And how does this run?
Well, it's that big 401. And
that's a pretty durable, bulletproof engine.
Yeah, and you know, this is a pretty modern car for an old car.
Yeah,
by the 60s. We were talking about this earlier. By the 60s, they were getting modern.
They had a lot of stuff sorted out by then.
I mean, the transmission is the first generation turbo hydro transmission.
And where was this one done?
This car was done here locally. Lou and Downey painted it. Terry Hagman did some body work on it. Needed very little. He just filled some holes for some old rub rails that were planted on it. By the way, when you do get to somewhere you have to make a Y-turn or something, the tires will drag on the fender openings, so just be
real easy on there.
Just listen for it. You'll know when to back off.
So you kept it with pretty much these stock size tires on it?
Yeah, we matched the OEM tires size-wise on these thin white walls. The illusion is that the tires are kind of big, because today I think guys tend to put a little smaller diameter tire.
We're going to do a 6-point turn here.
If you ever really get in a pickle, you just pump a little wind into it. That'll give you some tire clearance.
Yeah. Again, if you look at some of the other sort of throwbacks to true Buickness in this car, another one would be the gun sight hood ornament. Yeah. I mean, it's a little version of it, but that's still the Buick gun sight.
Yeah, it is.
The bomber sight.
Yeah, it is. We know a guy who's remaking those hood strips without that, and I'm tempted, but the gun sight's still fun.
Oh, yeah. That's so Buick.
Yeah.
Now, when did they, this came out 63, 4, 5. When did you start seeing customized versions of these showing up on the West Coast?
Well, my first experience was the kid that we knew. He just lowered it, put Skylark wires on it, and had a sound system that would break your heart. Went cruising. And he was the man. He was the man.
Yeah, there's a trade-off when you use air, but it does give you that ability to, to drop it really low for certain situations and still have it drivable when you need it.
Right. Now we could pump a little more air to it now and have a little more ride and get a little more civilized, but the maximum.
We look so good, man.
Well, we look good.
We look good.
You can't have both.